Good afternoon. Everybody can take their seats. Hopefully there are enough of them. This is an overflow crowd, which we love to see. I want to welcome you to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I'm Jock McKernan. I'm president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all here today to the Foundation's CEO Leadership Series, which today will feature our distinguished speaker, Tony Alexander, President and Chief Executive Officer of FirstEnergy. Like many of our programs, the Foundation is pleased to partner with our Chamber colleagues, the 21st Century Energy Institute, which is led by Karen Harbert, to bring you today's luncheon program. Our two organizations have a great history of working together to bring you some of the leading voices in today's businesses and perspective on the issues that they face. And Mr. Alexander and the FirstEnergy team are certainly well qualified in that regard. Because, you know, as much as FirstEnergy is about leading the way in energy, they're also very much about the power that makes the future of this country so promising. Without that power and innovation, the growth, competitiveness, and connectivity this country needs will not be possible. And that's why we at the Foundation are pleased to be featuring FirstEnergy today in our series. You know, the purpose of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation is to strengthen long-term American competitiveness and to promote the benefits of the free enterprise system to our economy and to our society. If you put it another way, we believe that solutions to virtually any policy challenge or opportunity in today's debate can and must be evaluated through a couple of key questions. First, will it advance America's competitiveness or thwart it? Second, will it drive growth, jobs, and opportunity in our free enterprise economy, or will it hold them back? Well, as we look at America's competitiveness, we at the Foundation do it through a number of lenses. First is sort of leveraging and showcasing the good that businesses do every day in their communities all across this country to benefit society. And we do this through our Corporate Citizenship Center. We're spearheading efforts to improve education and our job training system to close the skills gap that is holding back our competitiveness in America through our Center for Education and Workforce. We're matching veterans and military spouses with employers who value their leadership skills and their work ethic through our Hiring Our Heroes initiative. And we're working to ensure that America leverages the talent of all of its citizens through our Center for Women in Business. You know, talking about all that we do in the Foundation, I can't help but mention that it was just 1.5 years ago that we celebrated the centennial of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, its 100th anniversary. What we do in the Foundation in the areas of growth and skills and innovation, in addition to the other issues that we cover, we believe is very much about the next century of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And that's why gatherings like this noon are so important. As I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, energy and visionary leadership are integral to having a powerful and positive future for America. And today, we're delighted to put that power and energy on display with the remarks of FirstEnergy's CEO, Tony Alexander. So before we begin our formal program, though, we are also honored to have a number of important guests with us, and I'd like to introduce Senator Rob Portman of Ohio, who has joined us today. Senator Portman is a member of the Finance Committee, Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and the Committee on the Budget. Rob is a true friend of the Chamber, and he believes in fighting for pro-growth and pro-jobs policies. So could you please join me in welcoming Senator Rob Portman. Rob?
Jock, thanks very much. It's great to have you here at the Chamber. Jock talked a little about some of the good work the Chamber is doing, and a lot of it's because of his involvement here, particularly on the skills training and filling that skills gap that is a critical element of us getting this economy back on track. What Jock didn't say is we went to the same college, and he graduated before I did, even though he looks younger than me. He led a much healthier, more holy life than I have. I won't say how many years he graduated before me because he gave me such a nice introduction, but it's great to be here with you. And I thank the Chamber for letting me talk for a moment about my good friend Tony Alexander and about what he has done in his career, but also to thank the Chamber for the good work they're doing on the energy front. This is a terrific opportunity for our country. We aren't taking advantage of it as we should, despite the fact that we've had a big growth on the private sector side in terms of particularly natural gas and oil development, including in my home state of Ohio, but so much more potential out there. On public lands, dealing with regulations, dealing with permitting, we really are in the middle of a potential energy revolution that can help get, again, this economy back on track, along with the skills training and the other issues that the Chamber is focused on the pro-growth side. In terms of the energy issue, the Chamber's also been great in bringing to light this fuel transition that's underway with regard to our power grid. And a leader in that has been Tony. Tony Alexander came to me 3 or 4 years ago and predicted what's happening today, including coming to me and saying, you know, Rob, we're going to lose a lot of coal-fired plants in Ohio. At the time, no one was talking that way, but he was looking at a combination of some of the fuel switching going on, but mostly the regulatory environment and what the administration was talking about doing, particularly with regard to EPA regulations. And you think about it, there has been a big shift. Just in the last few years, coal provided up to 50% of our nation's electricity. 3 years ago, now it's 37%. Between 2001 and 2010, 150 coal plants were retired, and utilities have announced an additional 69 gigawatts of coal generation capacity, which is about 20%, by the way, of what we had in 2010, will be retired between 2010 and 2022. By the way, this impacts at least a dozen plants in Ohio. And what does this mean for Ohio? It means less jobs, and it means less reliability on the grid. There are a lot of factors that are driving this. Again, some of it's the fuel switching to natural gas, but a lot of it's thanks to the burdensome federal regulations and the lawsuits from environmental groups. You know, it's easier, faster, and cheaper to site natural gas plants. Domestic shale production obviously has been part of this, as I said, in Ohio and other states. But we've got a real problem right now, in my view, in terms of the reliability of the grid. After a couple of mild winters, this year's harsh winter brought to light some of those challenges. And it did so in Ohio, but really across the country. Electric markets in the eastern United States were stressed to their limits this winter. Winter peaks were set in several of the regional grid operators, including PJM, which is Ohio, NISO, SPP, and others. And during these cold weather events, the historical peak demand combined with high levels of generation outages pushed grid operators into emergency conditions in a number of occasions. And these are some of the issues that we faced in January: fuel issues, mechanical failures. They're saying 70 to 30% of generation offline on peak days. Also, we had obviously a big spike in natural gas prices. In some areas of the country, natural gas demand drove natural gas prices to record highs. Coal plants are slated for retirement in the next few years in Ohio. By the way, we're all that was between us and blackouts or rolling brownouts this winter. So this is a huge issue. And I want to thank one of my colleagues that's here in the room with us today, Senator Joe Manchin, because he and I have worked together to ensure that we're bringing this to light. In the Energy Committee on Thursday morning, we will have a hearing about this issue, reliability of the grid, and ensuring that, you know, we are actually taking a careful look at this. We're going to hear from industry experts like Tony, and we want to continue to work with the Chamber and others to ensure that we can maintain that long-term reliability and affordability in the electricity grid. So you're lucky to hear from Tony today. He's in the middle of, again, an ever-changing energy environment in this country, but again, my sense, he's been prescient, he gets it, he understands the big picture, which is saying a lot for a guy who started off as a tax lawyer. I told him today, I said, you know, I mean, I'm a recovering lawyer myself, but I was never capable enough to be a real tax lawyer. But he started with Ohio Edison as a tax lawyer, and here he is, President and CEO of FirstEnergy, one of the biggest utilities in the entire country. And he's not just a successful business person. Again, he's a policy guy. He's helped me. He's helped Joe Manchin. He's helped some other colleagues who are here. I see Pat Tiberi just arrived. I know that Jim Renacci was here, and Tim Murphy, Ed Whitfield, Bob Latta. So we look to him to give us advice and counsel on these issues. And he's able to give us FirstEnergy's perspective, but also a broader perspective. That's why I appreciate him. I also appreciate what he does in the community and what FirstEnergy does, not just providing power, but being very active members and making their communities a better place to live and work. So, Tony, congratulations on being the first speaker in the CEO series. It's totally appropriate. I know you all are going to enjoy his remarks, and thank you all for letting me say a few words this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Our formal program will begin after lunch. I'd just like to thank FirstEnergy again for everything that they're doing and for their participation today in this series. My colleague Karen Harbert will be up here shortly to continue the afternoon's program. I want to thank all of you for being here and welcome you to the chamber. Enjoy your lunch.
I hope you are enjoying some good discussion. It sounds like from up here you are. And I am happy to talk over the din and the clanking of forks. But now it gets quieter. That's great. Well, welcome to the U.S. Chamber and hopefully what looks like to be the beginning of spring. We're delighted to have you here and to be joined by so many prominent guests at what is going to be a really terrific afternoon. I'm Karen Harbert. I head up the Energy Institute here at the U.S. Chamber. And for those of you that are not familiar with the Institute, we're sort of a unique breed in this town. We do all things as it relates to energy. So that means the electricity side and the transportation side. And what we are trying to do is really forge a more common sense understanding of the energy issues, but more importantly, a practical discussion with much more practical outcomes. So we have employment for life, is what it seems like. Before we get going, and there's a number of people in this town that have very important things to do, and one of them I'd like to introduce. West Virginia is an energy state. It's a coal state, it's an oil and gas state, and it is certainly feeling the pinch of policy and regulatory challenges. You've heard from Senator Portman about the challenges and the opportunities. And for another state of FirstEnergy's service territory, I'd like to call up Senator Joe Manchin. Senator Manchin is on the Energy Committee, he's on the Armed Services Committee, he's on the Banking Committee, and on the Special Committee on Aging. So every one of those, in its unique way, is dealing with energy issues. So, Senator, please join me up here for a few remarks.
Well, good afternoon. I want to thank Karen for the great introduction. I appreciate being here, but most importantly, being here for my dear friend and his family. Tony, Becky, I know Anthony's here and the rest of the family, but Tony Alexander has been a great friend and a great corporate partner for the state of West Virginia. He works very well, and I appreciate that so much. In my other role and wearing another hat as governor of the state of West Virginia, I had a tremendous amount of interaction with all of our energy companies, and First is one of our largest players along with AEP in our state, and I'm very appreciative of that. Tony's always somebody you can ask a question to and he'll give you a straight answer. You might not like the answer, but it'll be from his heart and it'll be straight and accurate, and he'll be on target. Also, I want to thank the Chamber for holding this important meeting. Rob Portman has said before, we're having a hearing on the Energy Committee for reliability. I think Mr. Murray and I were just talking. Reliability right now, people don't understand. They're picking and choosing whichever energy source or energy mix they would like the best. But the bottom line is, where I come from in West Virginia, we're all in. We're for everything. We're for coal, we're for gas, we're for nukes, we're for the renewables. We just want to make sure that they can give us the reliability that we depend on and we need in this country, and that's the bottom line. So we're talking about that all the time and working. I have a dear friend of mine, Ed Whitfield, right here. Ed and I have worked on a bill that just made common sense, just purely common sense. With the EPA giving us all these directions of what they want us to do and how they want us to do it, we said, don't you at least believe you ought to have the technology and you can show us that you've been able to, under commercial load for 1 year, show us that you can do the job, and then set that as your emission standards, and we'll meet that. If we have new technology coming on, it moves the emission standards down. We can meet that because we know it's doable. Don't give me the pie in the sky stuff that doesn't work. So we think by having the reliability hearing we're going to have, we'll put everybody on notice You just can't have what you desire. Right now, for the polar vortex would have hit next year with 10,000 more megawatts of coal-fired power plant coming off, we'd have had the most vulnerable people in our society at risk of their lives. And we need to know that. And that needs to be brought up on Thursday. That's the reason we've asked for Senator Landrieu, and she's been so great at that, having that hearing for us. And we think that's going to be one that really sets a template for where we're going as a country. You know, since I've been there, someone says, boy, man, we sure do miss the good old days in the Congress. And I said, well, I've never been there whenever the good old days or when anything really works, so I can't comment on that. I know a lot of my colleagues are here, and I hope that they can remember those days. Since I've been there, I've seen a single budget pass, a government shutdown that lasted nearly 3 weeks, a self-inflicted almost default, a downgrade of our credit rating, and an overall dysfunction that would make the Hatfield and McCoy's conflict blush. So the good old days is something I love to see just a little bit of resemblance to. You know, the bottom line is that I've had people come up to me in the energy field, and they'll say, are you a denier? And I'll say, I'm not a denier. I believe that 7 billion people have had an impact on this wonderful planet of ours and responsible for the climate. We have something that we can do about it. And I look right at them and I say, are you a denier? And they look at me like I'm crazy, Tony. And they said, what do you mean? We're the one asked the question. I says, no, are you denying that you're not going to be needing fossil to energize this country for the next 3 decades or more? If you're a denier, then you're worse than anybody on the other side. So we better start working together. And that's really what it's about, coming together to figure out how we can have dependable, affordable, and reliable energy, that we can all continue to have a quality life in America. We just got to come together and start making decisions on what's best for the country, not best for ourselves or our party. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, I hope you put your label as being an American above both, and do it with gusto, because it's going to take that type of relationships and working together. And it's good to have all of us here and have all of you all being here to hear from a dear friend of mine and a person who will give it to you straight and tell you what's on the horizon and the mistakes we've made in the past and how we can prevent that from happening again. So with that, I want to say thank you. God bless each and every one of you. And remember this, we will keep the lights on.
Senator, thank you for those kind remarks. Just on logistics, for those of you that are in the 21st century and do Twitter, this is our Twitter feed, so feel free to contribute or watch the conversation on Twitter. And on the back of these cards are question cards, so please fill those out with your questions, and after Tony is finished speaking, we'll collect those, and the real Q&A will begin. I know we are very proud partners with the National Chamber Foundation and with Jock's Group on the CEO Leadership Series, which is very, very special. It's a special program that allows some of our nation's best to share their views and the tenets of their success. The CEOs who are featured in this series are not just hardworking or hard-driving people, but they're ones who rise to the test of leadership. They navigate challenging environments, and Tony is certainly doing that right now. They make difficult decisions, they explain them to their stakeholders, and they always keep the interests of their consumers and their employees top of mind. These featured CEOs have vision, conviction, and compassion. They're leaders, they're not managers. So it was really easy to choose Tony for this, to be one of the featured CEOs. He rose through the ranks of FirstEnergy and has invested his entire career with the company, knowing it from bottom to top and sideways, cultivating respect and relationships all along the way and at every level. You know, as Americans, we have a very confusing relationship with our electricity providers. We expect the lights to go on. We expect our coffee machines to brew in the morning. We expect our factories to function and our lights to go on. Yet we don't really often think about the mostly invisible industry that makes these everyday events possible, the quality of life possible. In fact, for most of us and for many Americans, really the only collection we have to our electricity provider is the bill we receive every day in the mail or when the lights go out. We have little appreciation for the technology, the investments, the skills, the people, the commitment of the companies that keep our lives and our economy moving. So before I introduce Tony, I want to show a little video that shows you what this means every day to a company like FirstEnergy. Please roll the video. As Senator Portman indicated, Tony began his career in the tax department, moved over to the legal department, and quickly probably decided he needs some other career choices. But after additional mergers, he stuck with FirstEnergy and ultimately became the chief operating officer, and then ultimately was named to the company's top spot in 2004. Lots has happened under his watch. In February of 2011, FirstEnergy merged with Allegheny Energy, but he insisted on keeping the company's headquarters in Akron. As of now, he now leads the largest investor-owned electric system system servicing 6 million customers and covering 65,000 square miles, making it one of the most powerful energy companies in the country. He received several degrees from the University of Akron and serves on their board of trustees. He's completed postgraduate work at Harvard and MIT, and he serves on lots of boards, including the Edison Electric Institute, the Institute for Nuclear Power Operators, and Akron Tomorrow. But just as importantly, he's very active in the community within the company. After he took over as CEO, he got behind Taking the Stage, a collection of leadership seminars designed to help women advance in the company. In 2008, he learned about an initiative within the company, Akron's Austin Bioinnovation Institute, which is a biomedical think tank that FirstEnergy helps fund. It was in the running for a $20 million grant from a foundation based in Miami. And he decided to go to Florida personally and advocate for that grant, and they got it, investing inside the company. Every year he goes and visits dozens and dozens of FirstEnergy work sites all across the country, meeting with employees to hear from them what is happening on the front lines so that they can improve their thinking. And with such a massive organization, Tony believes and says that human assets, the people of FirstEnergy, are the most important asset of the company. So I'll close with a quote of his own. They are the ones that keep the lights on every single day for everyone. They are the ones that give us the resources to help in economic development throughout our service territory. I think the most successful companies, and I would add CEOs, are the ones that realize in the end that your success is really tied to your employees. So with that, let me welcome Tony Alexander.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate the kind introduction and the opportunity to be a part of the Chamber's Leadership Series. It's a pleasure to share my thoughts on some of the major challenges we face in meeting America's energy needs. Before I begin, I'd like to recognize the Institute for 21st Century Energy for the efforts to encourage the development of a common-sense national energy policy, one that capitalizes on our country's abundant natural resources, unrivaled technical skills, and unlimited ingenuity. America's diverse and low-cost energy resources can be a catalyst for business expansion, job growth, and a more vibrant economy, and the Center's policy leadership is a welcome voice in that debate. All of us have been challenged by the economy over the last few years. And even though we're seeing some signs of economic recovery, the electric utility industry continues to experience weak demand for electricity and soft market prices for power. For example, in FirstEnergy's 6-state service area, our 2013 utility sales were below 2007 levels. And during that period, wholesale energy prices dropped by more than 40%. While this isn't the first time we've faced tough economic conditions, this is the longest period of economic stagnation I've seen in my 40 years in this industry. We will ultimately work through this, and as the economy grows, so will the use of electricity. But quite frankly, the challenges we now face from government interference in the electric business are far more intrusive and disruptive, and I believe far more significant to our industry's future and to your future. That's because whether it impacts our traditional regulated business or our competitive business, government policy is now aimed at stifling the growth and use of electricity and picking winners and losers in the competitive energy marketplace. Let me try to put this in perspective for you. And to do that, I'd like you to consider 3 questions. Would you compete in a market in which the government can and does suppress the demand for your product? Or would you want to compete in a market in which the government subsidizes your competitor? Or would you think it's fair to face competition from a supplier who can be indifferent to price, since all of its costs, including a return on investment, are guaranteed? These questions summarize in part the conditions we face in today's electric business. Keep in mind, electricity represents nearly 3% of our country's gross domestic product. The industry has invested more than $840 billion, employs more than 500,000 workers, and pays billions of dollars in taxes annually. And this year alone, the industry is projected to invest about $93 billion in transmission and distribution upgrades, environmental compliance, new generation capacity, and other capital-intensive projects that are needed to keep the electric system reliable. More importantly, we provide the cleanest and most efficient end-use energy source available. Simply put, electricity is more productive and more useful than any other form of energy. In fact, it's critical to our quality of life and our nation's economic vitality and security, which explains why creating a stable and reliable electric system is a key priority in every developing country. And America has done a better job than virtually any other country in keeping electricity reliable and affordable. Here in the United States, we keep the power on 99.97% of the time. And we do it at a price that, for the most part, is substantially below the price of electricity throughout the world. Despite these advantages, electricity is under attack in our country. And this battle is being waged largely through untested policies that will ultimately impact the reliability and affordability of electric service and the choices customers now enjoy. Thomas Sowell, a noted economist and commentator at Stanford University, summarized a broader trend that's now playing out in our nation's energy policy when he said, quote, "Much of the social history of the Western world over the past 3 decades has been a history of replacing what worked for what sounds good. In the electric utility industry, energy efficiency, renewable power, distributed generation, microgrids, rooftop solar, and demand reduction are all examples of what sounds good. And while they may all play some role in meeting the energy needs of customers, they are not substitutes for what has worked to sustain a reliable, affordable, and environmentally responsible electric system. And the mandates and subsidies needed to force their use have far-reaching consequences for our customers and our economy. Consider the fact that you can no longer buy a 100-watt incandescent light bulb in the United States, but you can purchase a 500-horsepower vehicle. They don't add up. Or that electric customers are being forced to pay additional costs for unneeded subsidized generation. Or that these policies and others are designed to achieve a social agenda that has little, if anything, to do with maintaining electric service. And they are shifting the fixed cost of the system to customers who can least afford it and are undermining our nation's competitive position. Let me give you a few examples of these policies, starting with the mandates and subsidies for renewables. 29 states and the District of Columbia have adopted mandatory renewable portfolio standards. Together, these states account for about 65% of total U.S. electricity demand. Now, I'm not suggesting that renewables should not be appropriately pursued, but experimenting with the electric system can have serious unintended consequences, and we are now seeing those play out. In Germany, for example, renewables now represent 25% of that country's generating capacity. The mandates provide wind and solar energy producers with a guaranteed price, usually well above the market price, and ensure that any electricity they produce is dispatched to the grid before conventional sources. As a result of these mandates, Germany's electricity prices have more than doubled, and are now more than 37 cents per kilowatt hour. In comparison, the average electricity price in the United States is about 10 cents per kilowatt hour. The fact is, Germany's electricity policies are not only hindering economic growth, but they are creating a class of energy-poor customers. And this isn't just the case in Germany. Spain, Italy, and other countries that have pursued this path are seeing the same impacts. But here in the United States, enthusiasm for renewable mandates and subsidies persists. And that means the electric system is relying more on intermittent sources of generation, such as wind and solar. These sources only produce electricity about 30% of the time at best, require backup generation, and substantial investments in transmission to maintain reliability, since no customer that I know of only uses electricity 30% of the time, particularly only when the wind blows. And subsidies, such as the production tax credit, encourages developers to build, whether or not the generation is needed. This excess capacity is not only uneconomic. If it was economic, you wouldn't have to subsidize it. But it puts additional pressure on baseload coal and nuclear assets that are absolutely essential to grid stability and affordable energy prices. Now let's look at the impact of energy efficiency mandates. Let me be clear. FirstEnergy supports and encourages energy efficiency and the wise use of electricity by our customers, and we always have. And in some cases, it makes sense to charge all customers in order to fund energy efficiency programs for customers who cannot make those investments on their own. But when efficiency targets are mandated by government and based on arbitrary, overly aggressive goals, all customers pay the price, and it's a substantial tax on those who do not or cannot participate in the program. For example, by 2025, Ohio's energy efficiency mandate would eliminate nearly 22% of the electricity currently used by Ohio customers. Even though we are only at about a 3% reduction, industrial customers in Ohio are already seeing the impact, with some paying more than $1 million per year for mandated efficiency programs. And the tax Ohio customers will pay for these programs will greatly increase over time in order to achieve the much higher targets mandated by state law. In parts of the country, the electric system is also now being designed under the assumption that customers won't use electricity. It's called demand response. And as a result, while system emergency interruptions were not something electric customers have been used to in the past, since June 1st of last year, demand response customers in Ohio were called upon to curtail their use of electricity 6 times. Fundamental design changes in how the system operates and works create significant issues for customers. Now, put that in perspective. No emergency curtailments were called in Ohio over the previous 40 years. And I can count on one hand from memory the amount of emergency interruptions we've had over the last 40 years. And many businesses are now considering whether they can continue to interrupt their ability to manufacture the product they sell in order to accommodate the changes being made in the electric system. And if they change their minds, all customers could be left with inadequate power supplies. So why are we engaged in this experiment with the electric system, taking away customer choice, increasing prices, and jeopardizing reliability? It can't be because electricity is the cleanest end-use source of energy. It can't be because electricity improves our comfort and productivity. In fact, the true value of electricity to our economy, national security, and our quality of life far exceeds the price paid for the product. It can't be to reduce our trade imbalance. Electricity is primarily produced from domestic resources and always has been. Nor can it be related to growth in our economy, since electricity is fundamental to expansion. Without it, the economy cannot grow. Quite frankly, I believe state and federal policymakers are manipulating the supply and demand and distorting markets for electricity to further advance the war on coal. And the convergence of government policies, laws, and regulations aimed at coal use, both directly through EPA rules and indirectly through subsidies, preferences, and mandates, will lead to higher prices and less reliable service over the long term. The United States holds the world's largest estimated recoverable reserves of coal. We're a net exporter of coal. And over the past 3 years, coal has been used to generate about 40% of this nation's electricity. The continued use of these important and cost-effective domestic resources, however, is being challenged by environmental rules. For example, as a result of the U.S. EPA's mercury and air toxic standards, an estimated 376 coal-based units will close in 38 states over the next 3 to 5 years. That's nearly 17% of our nation's coal fleet's capacity. And there are other EPA rules being considered that could have similar impacts on the fleet. But it's not just EPA rules that are challenging our use of coal. In competitive markets, if market rules don't change to reflect the true value of baseload generation, additional units may be shut down, and some already have been. And coal isn't the only energy source in jeopardy due to the state of competitive markets. Nuclear units might also be prematurely shut down. And it is unlikely that any new nuclear units will be built in competitive markets under current conditions. Yet we need to replace as many as 100 nuclear units by 2050 if their licenses are not extended again. That's nearly not as much time as it sounds. And whether you agree or disagree with the need to control carbon emissions, the simple fact is, without nuclear energy, it will be difficult to meet any carbon objective. And if we turn our backs on coal, it may prove impossible to sustain the reliability and affordability of the electric service we now enjoy. You know, no discussion of the future is complete without recognition of the role natural gas is likely to play. We have been blessed with a new, abundant resource to produce electricity, but more important, to stimulate our economy. In fact, we now have an energy cost advantage for both electricity and natural gas that should change the prospects for growth, economic development, and expansion in all of our manufacturing segments. And while we expect natural gas to play an increased role in electricity production, substantial changes will be needed in the natural gas pipeline and storage infrastructure so that it can match the just-in-time nature of the electric system. Unfortunately, as we learned during the polar vortex in January, that infrastructure is a long way from being able to assure reliable electric service. Now, you heard Senator Portman and even Senator Manchin talk a little bit about this winter and what was going on. And there were a lot of things happening in the market at that point. But with respect to some of these units, natural gas units, Some of them are offline because natural gas is being used for higher priorities. I've already been told this summer I will not be able to use natural gas for my peaking units. It will be diverted to storage because the storage fields are so low. And the entire market this winter was affected by a substantial increase in the price of natural gas. I don't want to get into the details with you of what happened, but to put the price increase in perspective, it was the equivalent of paying $85 per gallon of gasoline. That's a lot. The regional grid was under severe stress during the weather event, and the lessons learned should be obvious. We need to maintain a diverse fleet, including real generating assets, coal, nuclear, and natural gas, to ensure reliable, affordable service over the long term. But perhaps more important, we need to develop a national energy plan that will allow us to take advantage of our vast supply of domestically produced resources, both coal and natural gas, and our superior electric system to stimulate and support our economy. President Ronald Reagan wrote a letter to Congress on July 17, 1981. And in that letter, he said, quote, "Our national energy plan should not be a rigid set of production and conservation goals dictated by government. When the free market is permitted to work the way it should, millions of individual choices and judgments will produce the proper balance of supply and demand our economy needs." That's pretty good advice. And reflecting on it, I'd like to give you a couple of thoughts with respect to how I think that should develop. We need an approach to electric energy that makes reliability, affordability, and economic expansion our key priorities. We need to reaffirm this nation's long-term energy policy in favor of diversity of supply and reliance on the market, not the government picking winners and losers among energy technologies and customer choices. We need better coordination among federal agencies and the regulatory certainty needed to support the long-term investments that have been made and will continue to be made to maintain essential electric service. We need an energy policy that recognizes regional differences and provides the flexibility and time needed for each region to adapt to its resources and conditions. And we need an energy policy that establishes a balance between necessary and effective environmental standards and the reliability and affordability of electricity. There are no easy choices, and there never have been. However, we can strike a balance that will not only ensure we can continue to enjoy the overwhelming benefits of our electric system, but also support economic expansion and one that keeps our country strong and secure. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Well, I've already gotten a number of questions from the audience, and I'm getting more,
Good.
so I'm going to try and consolidate some of them so we get the most out of our time here. Senator Manchin mentioned the hearing that is coming up on Thursday that Senators Landrieu and Murkowski are having. The FERC has been talking about reliability and resiliency of the grid a tremendous amount. We've had the polar vortex in our rearview mirror. And so you're talking about preserving baseload power. And yet our policies are heavily tainted towards accelerating those sources which challenge baseload power. Can you talk a little bit about that balance you just talked about, that we don't have the balance to preserve what is already providing reliable power?
When you think about, and this is primarily is happening in competitive markets, not necessarily in regulated markets. Regulated markets are operating pretty much under the same model that they have for years. But in competitive markets, what we have done is make every single resource exactly equal in value, irrespective of where it's located, irrespective of whether it can provide support to the grid, irrespective of whether it has fuel sources, or whether it's dependent on the pipeline, or spot gas prices, if they can get them. Whether or not it can operate 30% of the time or 100% of the time. Whether or not it has a fuel inventory available. We made all resources of the market exactly the same. And when you do that, you put significant pressure on those assets that we need most for providing the kilowatt hours customers need. It's nice to talk about demand response. Demand response is a peak shaving device. It shouldn't be used on a day-to-day basis to provide electric service. The idea that we are designing an electric system to interrupt customers on a day-to-day basis, depending on how much capacity we have available and how many machines we have available to run, is a very dangerous course. We saw some of that this winter. And by the way, we had 13,000, 14,000, maybe up to 15 or 20,000 megawatts of capacity that will in fact be shut down over the next 2 years, online and running. It ran last summer. Matter of fact, a plant we shut down in October ran flat out in the summer to meet load. But its value in the market was zero. And therefore, it couldn't afford to pay for the costs associated with the environmental upgrades associated with that plant. That's the path we are on. I think it's a path that can lead to much more concerns about reliability in the long term and a much different electric system than we have today.
Taking it just a step further, as we know, we've got new EPA regulations, obviously for new additions, but the existing fleet is going to be subject to new regulations. So forecast out a little bit. I know that's a dangerous business in forecasting, but look into the future a little bit, 2016 and beyond, and we see two things. You've got this regulatory challenges. What do you see in terms of the challenges for the industry after those regulations are in place, whether it's a man-made or a natural-made challenge to the system?
Well, let's just talk about a number of them. That's the first one has to do with carbon, right? In the sense, what are we going to do if there's more intrusive carbon emission type of regulations that accelerate faster what's going to naturally occur anyways in this business? The way the rules are structured like right now, unless we can come up with some new technology called for carbon capture and storage, which we do not have, there will be no new coal-fired plants built in America. Over the next 20 or 30 years or 40 years, just pick 2050 as the date, almost every coal-fired plant in America that exists today will be upwards of 70, 80, 90 years old. Those plants aren't going to be around. We're dealing with something that's going to naturally move on in time in any event. We need to focus on how we're going to maintain our nuclear fleet over this time frame and how we're going to make sure that whatever we replace coal-fired capacity with over that time frame has the same reliability as the coal-fired fleet, which means you're going to have to build a lot more pipeline. You're going to have to build a lot more storage. You're going to have to make the pipeline in the storage system look like the coal pile inventory at baseload power plants. And that's not going to be easy to do. You're going to have to reprioritize. If we can interrupt customers on the electric system, why can't we interrupt them on the gas system? We have demand response, why don't they? There's a whole series of things that will have to come into play, and this country needs time to allow that to happen. You do not change a multi-billion-dollar industry with the type of investment that's necessary to maintain the only energy source that really matters. Sorry I said that, Bob. Bob is my dear coal friend, and I need his coal to produce my energy. But at the end of the day, without electricity, nothing else matters, because nothing else works. Nothing else works. So it's absolutely critical that we maintain it, we maintain its reliability, we maintain its affordability, because it is the catalyst that will support the growth in this country over the long term, and it always has been.
Two questions that are related on shale gas. We are experiencing a shale gas revolution, as you talked about. That's afforded us a manufacturing renaissance, or the beginnings of a manufacturing renaissance, because the feedstock is so much more affordable here than it is in Europe and even in Asia. Are you concerned about two things? Number one, with the suite of environmental regulations that are coming down the pike that will initially hurt coal, will they hurt gas? Will they raise prices? Will they impact that renaissance? And are you at all concerned about critics to LNG exports as it relates to challenging our manufacturing renaissance?
No, I'm not concerned about the LNG exports. I think it's absolutely critical that this country expand its capability of serving the world with resources like natural gas, and help that part of that industry create more jobs, because they'll need to drill more. The fact of the matter is, natural gas is a blessing to this country. You know, I was in Pittsburgh not too long ago, and they were talking about it as being the same type of thing that occurred when they found oil in Pennsylvania, and how it stimulated the entire Ohio Valley Basin to grow. We're at that point today. We have to use natural gas going forward. We have to strike a balance. You know, natural gas is not pollution-free. Nothing we do is. But we cannot stop it. We owe that to our children. We owe it to their children. We owe it to our country to put it and make it as strong as it possibly can be. And the only way it can do that is if it's economically strong and it can provide jobs to more and more people. Those are the keys to the United States' future. They always have been. That's the promise of America. What we cannot do is take it away. Take it away because you can't use natural gas, or it becomes the next, beyond coal campaign. We've already started to hear it. If we stop growth, we stop the future, and that's simply not fair.
You mentioned Germany, so we can look right across the pond to some of the policy choices that they have made in Europe, not just in Germany, but in Europe. And I know that you've talked about this before. Tell us a little bit about the choices they've made and the implications that are playing out in real time, and what that has meant for their economy that can be instructive to us here.
Well, there's a couple of things. I only touched on the price aspects of it, which I'm sure all of you can appreciate. Those are pretty significant differences, 10 cents to 37 cents per kilowatt hour. That's a lot. That would have a very large impact on the United States' economic capability going forward. But they're also seeing something that they'd never seen before either, and that is interference. I shouldn't say it's not really interference. It is required action by the grid operators to sustain and maintain reliability. The number sticks in my mind is something like over 1,200 times grid operators had to do something different, otherwise the system would have failed. That's not something we're used to, and it's far greater than what they were used to when they had more traditional sources supplying their requirements. Their emissions of carbon, their carbon emissions have increased, and they've increased pretty significantly. Part of that's because they've decided not to use nuclear power, which would have the same consequence here, obviously, and substitute with any other form. The other part of it is you're running your base load units inefficiently. You're starting them up, shutting them down. You all drive your cars, press on the gas. What's it do? Your gas mileage goes way down. Gas mileage doesn't get good until you start leveling her off. Power plant runs the same way. You start these things up and down, you're going to increase emissions. You're going to make them less reliable, less efficient. We're already seeing that in the competitive markets today. The reliability of the baseload coal-fired fleet is rising each and every year. The unforced losses on the baseload fleet are rising each and every year. And they're rising because there have been suppressed prices. There's not enough money to invest in the facility. So its reliability is being challenged. These are all combination of things that need to be addressed if we're going to be able to ensure reliable electric service over the long term.
For reliability, resiliency, stability of the system, you need infrastructure to be able to move around molecules to where they're needed to generate electricity. You need lines to transmit electricity. Talk a little bit about the permitting challenges that we're facing. I mean, are we a country open for business? Are we making it too difficult? Are we we like to call it the banana republic, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone? What can the federal government do to actually get infrastructure built in this country so that we've got that resilient system?
Building things is a challenge. Probably everybody in this room knows that, no matter what you're building. Building things is a challenge sometimes, depending on where you locate. You know, obviously the pipeline industry has more of a one-stop shop going to being able to do it on a national level, not local. That would certainly help with some of the long lines that we have to put in on the electric side. But the fact of the matter is, while it takes time, and quite frankly, sometimes a lot more expense, most of the time we've been able to accommodate it. Not always. But it'd certainly be easier if we had one-stop shopping for siting as opposed to state by state and in some cases local kinds of authority, especially when you're talking about bigger transmission facilities. That would certainly help. It's a challenge. It's always going to be a challenge in the industry. You talked about what people are considering in Colorado as a restriction on potential drilling and fracking. Doesn't sound like bad, but it has serious effects. You need to think about what we need as an overall policy, and then you need to put in place and break down the barriers to allow it to happen as quickly as you possibly can. Time is money. The longer we wait to do things, the more time it takes to do them, the more expensive it'll be for customers. And we should always try to focus on what the impact of it is on the overall customer when they're going to have to pay for it in any event. So we should try to look for the way to make it at the least cost possible, get it done as quickly as you can under the right set of rules so that we benefit from a society perspective. If we didn't approach things like that, we wouldn't have highway systems, we wouldn't have water systems, we wouldn't have sewer systems. Somebody's got to make those kind of decisions, and we've got to move on with it. Because if we allow everything to be stopped by the least common denominator, then we all suffer as a result of it.
Last question. Your industry has to have long time horizons to make big capital investments. If we were having this discussion 10 years ago, it probably would be very different than what we were talking about today. Challenges that we didn't see then, opportunities we didn't see then. So we invite you back in 10 years, and we're having this discussion again, because you're still going to be at FirstEnergy. You come back in 10 years. What is it that you think we could be talking about then that we don't see now, that you have on your radar screen that everybody else isn't talking about?
Well, I wish my crystal ball weren't out 10 years at this point. There are so many things.
Well, no one's here in this town does, so don't feel bad.
There's so many things going on in this industry that what I'm particularly hopeful is that ultimately regulators and customers will understand that at the end of the day, you can't use a private company's balance sheet and its ability to bill to carry out social policy. You cannot use that capability to ultimately tax all customers for what you perceive as a benefit to certain customers. And if we can get that basic concept put in place over the next several years, 10 years out, I think the question will be, how are we going to keep up with the demand that this country has for jobs, for growth, because there will be nothing in the way to stop us. That's what I look forward to. Thank you.
No better way to close than with a question like that. I think it's very clear why we chose Tony to join us as the first CEO Leadership Series of 2014. So, Tony, thank you very much. You were delightful. Great vision, great leadership. Great. Thank you very much.